So let's take a look at the reading section of the writing and language section. We're looking at evidence-based reading and writing overall, and it does have some questions in science and social studies, as well as a literature passage. The misnomer here, the cross test score. It doesn't matter what your particular knowledge of those two topics are. It's reading strategies, and that's what I'm going to focus on. Types of questions, just like the writing and language section. Words and context, command of evidence is what we're going to look at. But again, back to our importance, and I'm going to leave myself up here for this part. Back to my importance of timing. Timing being very important. These key numbers here. 5, especially in the reading, 5 passages, 52 questions, 52 questions, 65 minutes, 13, that breaks it down to 13 minutes a passage, each passage being about 500 to 750 words, and each one having 10 to 11 questions. Again, 5 passages total. You got about 13 minutes a passage. This is the biggest key right here. 13 minutes a passage. That's a big key. 13 minutes a passage. I'm highlighting that quite a few times, just to keep pace. 2 to 3 details about the passage. In other words, you'll ask me to know about 2 to 3 details. I'm going to, in subsequent videos, show you some reading strategies that you can use to help you with this as well, to help you navigate through this a little easier. Words in context. So I'm going to hide myself here and I'm talking about words in context. That's one of the major types of questions you'll see. You determine the word, meaning the vocabulary, word in context. I'm going to show you some examples of these in a moment. You're analyzing word choice. The author says something. How are they saying it? What's the structure, the purpose, their craft? That's words in context. Command of evidence, again, some questions will ask you to go back and find evidence in the passage or pair of passages that best supports the answer to the previous question or serves as a basis for a reasonable conclusion. We call this inference, right? Serving as the basis for a reasonable conclusion. Identify how the author might make an argument and use evidence to support their claim. A relationship between an informational graphic and the passage it is paired with. We'll look at examples of this. So in the detail type questions, it can be tied to some sort of inference or generalization question sometimes. Sometimes it's a second of 2 in a set. I'm going to show you that here in a minute. If a question refers to a specific line, look at that line. If necessary, reread the sentences before and after the line. This is where it takes a little longer. If no specific line is given, skim through the section looking for keywords or phrases in the question, in the question stem or answer choices, right? It may refer to specific information given in the chart too. Sometimes a command of evidence questions or detailed questions. Vocabulary and context is just that. It's a word or phrase, not necessarily as it's defined by a dictionary, but it's how it's phrased in the context of the sentence of around the line it is in. So the answer choices may include 2 words or phrases that are possible definitions, but you have to decide in the context how it works in the context. Always review the sentence, the word or phrase it contains before you answer the question. Review the sentence around it. In some cases, you may have to reread the sentences around the one contained in the word or phrase to help you figure it out. Another common type of question, main idea, usually signified by saying the question stem. Main idea or purpose of the passage is another example of those, of what signifies a main idea question. Again, important in understanding the types of questions to be able to tackle them. The overall sense you get when you skim the passage. You need to be skimming the passage effectively. So before answering, ask yourself, what's the overall purpose? What's the tone? What are the author's main points? These are the questions you may want to skip until the end, especially if they ask it to you at the first question, especially if they ask you in the first question on a main idea. You might want to skip that. So here's some examples of main idea. The main purpose of the first paragraph. So what, how it can be, what's the purpose in its context. The central claim of the passage. Here is an analyzing argument question, the central claim of the passage. So again, these are questions you may want to answer a few more detailed questions on before you decide on this, before you decide on answering the main idea. Inference can be hard, although on the SAT they're not as hard as I'd say in the old ACT, because often they're accompanied by a two-parter where you're looking for some details to back it up. Generalization, cause effect, comparative relationship, sequence of events. What's the purpose? So evidence-based questions may follow the inference question. Attempt to find relevant sections of the line numbers using that section of need. I'll show you some examples here in a bit. Reviewing sections that are relevant, keywords or points. If the answer doesn't stand out, eliminate ones can't possibly be correct. So here's and go with the conservative answer, not with something off the wall. So something that makes sense within the context of the passage. Studying of writing or speaking. So the author uses the word, how the specific phrases or words are used to create meaning or tone. So the author uses the word exact or specific to complement in lines 47 through 49 in the final paragraph. How do they function? That's an example of rhetoric. So why would the author use the particular words that they're using? Analyzing text structure. What choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage? So in other words, how is the author laying something out? Often this is done with the literature type of passages. You also get chart and graph type of questions. I'm going to show you a chart and a graph here, just to show you. So here, I'm going to come back to this passage, but these are examples of charts and graphs. So how are they presented? Well, charts and graphs can also just be a straight data type of question. How test on whether you can read the info presented. Now, read the graph, determine what the question is asking, refer to the graph for the answer. Often in the science section, you'll see this, or in a social studies passage like here. Data in the graph indicates that the greatest difference between per pound profits from fair trade coffee and those from regular coffee occurred during which period. Again, you go back, look at the chart, and decide just by evaluating the chart. But you have to be careful. You got to know how to read a chart, basic X and Y axes. And then charts and graphs, a data question, and then interpreting data, drawing a conclusion or support based on the data. So in other words, which choice is best supported by the data in the first figure? And this is talking about primary occupational public transportation passengers in U.S. cities. I'm going to show you this passage actually as an example. So go through the choices to determine which one is accurate based on the data. And then if the data doesn't support it, eliminate it until you can find the choice. Sometimes it's better to have a context for reading the passage as well. The other one is combining data with information. Requires you to understand the data and what's written in the passage. These are probably the hardest ones. You may have to refer to the passage to make sure the data in the passage reflect the answer choice. So the writer wants the information in the passage to correspond as closely as possible to the information in the map. Given that goal and assuming the rest of the previous sentence will remain unchanged, in which sequence should the three terms for soft drinks be discussed? So again, you're looking, pop, Coke, soda. In other words, how in the north, in the northwest, of course, or excuse me, in the Midwest and in the west and the north, we refer to it as pop a lot, right? And then Coke in the south. Hence, the Coke was founded, if you don't know, in in Atlanta. So that's why in Georgia. So that's why they use Coke a lot, and then soda, of course, is a more east and west thing. So they want to make sure that matches up. Words. So here's some sample questions and how they look. Words in context. As used in line 55, the word intense most nearly means what? And so, again, an intense clustering of jobs, innovation, and productivity in a smaller number of bigger cities and regions. So in this case, it would be concentrated, right? Here's an example of a sample question. in the context of the passage, the author's use of the phrase "her light steps step flying in time to keep with his long stride" is primarily meant to convey the idea. So again, what how does that function? You're going to be asked to understand how does phrases function as well as words sometimes. The description in the first paragraph indicates that what Ethan values most about Maddie is her. So again, this is more of an inference question or an understanding relationships question between the two characters. Often this is found in the literature passage. That's usually the first passage, and then which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question. This is what I was telling you. So understanding relationships between two items or making it some sort of generalization here. I'm going back to my inference questions here, understanding a cause effect or comparative relationship. And then it's going to ask you to go back and look at the various lines and decide which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question. So this is a new item type for most of you. You're not used to this. Often what you could do is go back and look for the description, and you want to use the stem. What does Ethan value most about Maddie? And then look for where that's described in what lines. And I'll go through that when we go through a whole passage. So these are question type examples. I'm going to go through the question type examples with you, and we'll look at those very specifically, so that you can decide, the question type examples, so that you can decide how to best tackle these questions.